I Hate the News is the weekly news bulletin from I Hate Politics podcast, a show about a human activity we love to hate. I am Sunil Dasgupta. It's March 3rd, 2026. In a sign of continuing upheaval, tomorrow, March 4th, the Federal Office of Personnel Management is shutting down the website for the combined federal campaign, one of the nation's largest charity drives, which solicits donations from federal employees. Unclear if the CFC, as it is widely known, is being shut down entirely. Data center wars heat up as a new facility is proposed at the site of an old coal power plant in Dickerson in Montgomery County, Maryland. Not far away in West Virginia, state officials welcome an even bigger data center. But what are the consequences? Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen says ICE is moving its fleet of equipment, cars, and armored vehicles from Minneapolis to Williamsport, outside Hagerstown in Maryland. Maryland Delegate Von Stewart explains two bills that seek to curtail ICE jails as state leaders seek avenues to check ICE presence in the state. PTA leader Dan Silva of the Magruder High School cluster, which centers on Durwood, on organizing families to push for renovation at Magruder, and more. Stay with us. I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society functioning precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. Music for this episode comes from Washington, D.C. progressive rock band A Shrewdness of Apes. Ian Mabley on vocals and guitar, Josh Pittman on bass, and J.R. Franks on drums. You can find their music at asoaband.com. The Combined Federal Campaign is a charity program that solicits donations from federal employees for nearly 4,000 nonprofits. Federal employees can contribute a set amount from their regular paychecks and designate the money to go to their favorite charity on the approved list. Both the amount of donations it has collected and the number of charities it serves used to be much larger. The appeal of the Combined Federal Campaign, or CFC as it is known, has been declining for several years now because of management issues and competition from other publicly available giving tools, including GoFundMe. But the last year, the Trump administration has brought new uncertainty over whether the program itself will continue to exist. CFC is administered by the Federal Office of Personnel Management, OPM. Each year, at the start of the giving season, OPM used to open the process for charities to list themselves on their website. Last December, we had reported that CFC would not open for charity listing on time, and now comes the news that tomorrow, March 4th, CFC will shut down its website, givecfc.org. The step appears to be another move toward shutting down CFC entirely. Much of the money from CFC's annual giving campaign goes towards DMV area nonprofits, in part because the area also has a large number of contributing federal workers. Data center wars are here in Montgomery County, Maryland. The county council is considering a zoning text amendment to allow Atmosphere data centers to build a facility at the site of the old Dickerson coal power plant. Similar projects exploiting brownfield land have been proposed in Frederick County and other parts of the state and the country. But Chesapeake Climate Action Network's president, Mike Tidwell, has reservations.
A data center development company called Atmosphere has decided they want to build a 300 megawatt data center at the old Dickerson coal plant site in Montgomery County, right on the banks of the Potomac River. They say that they are committed to building the greenest, most efficient, most environmentally sensitive data centers in the world. So I requested a Zoom conversation with the CEO, some of the vice presidents or sustainability people. We all got on a call, and it began with them presenting a PowerPoint singing their environmental praises. You know, we're going to put so much of this land in the old Dickerson coal plant area into conservation easements. We're going to build a battery farm to store energy, but they never mentioned how are they going to get their electricity to power this energy intensive, this electron guzzling data center. So after 30 minutes of this presentation of how green they are and no mention of energy, I said, well, I'm a climate activist. My organization is committed to clean energy solutions to global warming. What is your clean energy plan? And they basically confessed they don't have one. They don't intend to adopt one. They have no interest in committing to clean energy. They are simply going to draw electrons from the regional PJM grid, which is majority fossil fuel based, that if you're just drawing off that grid, you're triggering tremendous emissions of greenhouse gases. So I asked them, what is your commitment? Will you commit to clean energy to power this data center? And they said, well, we thought about nuclear, but that's too complicated. And we thought about wind and solar, but it's really hard to build wind and solar in this region right now. And therefore, we don't have a plan. And that was really, really disappointing because Google has committed to 20 gigawatts of clean electricity to power their data centers across the country. And Atmosphere could make a commitment to clean energy.
Would you only have green data centers if they are at scale?
I think you could have a green data center, whether it's just a small one or a large one. The question is, what is your commitment? Yes, Google has a lot of money, but Atmosphere is developing this data center for a quote unquote customer. So there's a big tech company in the background who has not been named yet, who is going to take control of this data center after Atmosphere develops it. If Atmosphere does not make a commitment to clean energy for this data center, it will on day one, the day they turn it on, it will become by far the biggest polluter in Montgomery County. It will trigger 1 million tons of CO2 per year from this one data center. And just for perspective, that means it will jack up the entire county's greenhouse gas emissions between 12 and 14%. And it will trigger a 2% increase in the entire state of Maryland's CO2 emissions.
What do you say to people that say, well, if Virginia is going to do it anyway, CO2 is not limited by county lines or state lines, or even the river, this is not helping?
If you can't build a green data center in Montgomery County, where can you build one? Our county has always prided itself that it is committed to progressive, justice-oriented policies and actions, whether it be gun violence prevention, progressive investments in schools, the environment, a ag reserve. We are different, and we don't rely on what other people do and what other people think. We have a strong historic commitment to environmental sustainability. Tragically, this data center will blow that up. And I think that your typical Montgomery County voter expects more. We don't want to be Loudoun County. We don't want to see this unmitigated data center expansion that creates tremendous noise 24/7, that guzzles tons of water, and that emits just millions of tons of CO2 and methane.
What is the state of play with the approvals?
They have a conditional permit to build this data center. There's still a lot of permits left to be issued. There is a proposed zoning text amendment that's coming, probably will be passed this summer. And it's not clean. It's not green. It's not going to be good for ratepayers in Montgomery County. And I think the county council is just now starting to realize that there is a lot of grassroots pressure that's mounting for the county to protect our environment in Montgomery County, to protect our climate goals, our carbon reduction goals, which are some of the highest in the country. And of course, to protect ratepayers. So I think what started out as, oh, finally, we're going to get a green data center. We're going to, in green Montgomery County, we're going to show the rest of the country how to do it. Unfortunately, that has fallen apart, and the company Atmosphere is coming under a lot of scrutiny. I've seen a lot of greenwashing from polluting industries over the years, but if you look at their website of Atmosphere and then you see their total lack of commitment to clean energy, it's pretty astonishing.
Mike Tidwell, thank you. We'll be watching.
Thank you, Sunil.
In nearby West Virginia, state leaders have mounted a big welcome to a $4 billion data center project in their state. West Virginia House Delegate Evan Hansen explains how much is known and what is not known.
From the media reports, it sounds like it's a company called Penzance, and they say they're going to invest $4 billion to build a data center that's going to require a whole lot of electricity. It's going to be 600 megawatts of power once they build that, and that's extremely large. That's like the size of, say, like half of a large coal-fired power plant in order to power that one data center.
Have they said where they're getting their power from?
They've said that they're going to hook it up to the grid. So First Energy is the parent company of our electric utility in that part of the state. So they had the opportunity to use the law that the legislature passed in West Virginia last year to build a microgrid to self-supply their power, but they chose not to do that. So they're going to plug into the grid.
Data centers have the ability to go directly into the grid. Did the law allow that?
Yeah, the law does allow that, and it outlines a specific process that the data centers should undertake with their local utilities to negotiate with them about rates and about whether sufficient electricity is available to power the data centers. But it also provides for microgrids if they choose to go that route.
Do you have a sense why they chose not to do the microgrid, especially in this environment? And especially even because the president has been saying that he prefers data centers to bring their own energy?
My guess is that it has to do about timing, that if you're going to go the microgrid route and bring your own energy, you need to go through the process to develop and build a new power plant. And that takes many years. Whereas if you hook up to the grid, it'll take much less time.
And there is no plan to say that, we hook up to the grid for the time being, but eventually we'll move to our own supply.
Well, there's very few details available about any of their plans, other than the announcement they made at the governor's office a few days ago and certain press accounts. So I have to say that I don't think anybody really knows what their longer term plan is.
What do you think are the impacts of the data center on your community, on the state, maybe even grid-wise?
The first thing that I think we need to get right is the electricity, because these data centers consume huge amounts of electricity. So that's one category. The second is the water. The data centers, depending on what technology they use, could withdraw huge amounts of water from local groundwater or streams and rivers. And we need to make sure that those withdrawals don't impact other users of water. And the third broad category is local control. In other words, do local ordinances and zoning have any impact or does the local county or municipality have any say in protecting their citizens by employing their existing or new zoning ordinances?
In this case, is there local laws that can be used to change the project itself?
Well, there would be if House Bill 2014 had allowed it. But one of the key features of House Bill 2014 that passed last session was to make local ordinances and local zoning null and void and unenforceable. Things like noise ordinances or traffic or setbacks from existing communities, they're unenforceable now.
Are there groups in West Virginia concerned about the impact, particularly on electric bills? Because that's a huge problem.
There are lots of people concerned about impacts on electric bills.
What are they doing about it?
Well, I could say one thing that I've been doing about it with my caucus, with the Democratic caucus, is we have several bills that we think would address that. We actually had debate on one of those bills on the House floor last week because we were trying to amend it to a piece of legislation that was going through the process, and that was to actually have a rate freeze for a certain amount of time. And, there are pros and cons to freezing electric rates, but West Virginians' electric rates have gone up tremendously over the last 10, 20 years. I've been involved with a group of legislators from most, if not all, of the PJM states to provide suggestions on how they should deal with this issue, because it's a big deal across the entire 13-state region. And the proposal from us, the state legislators, was to give the data centers a choice. Either you bring your own power, in which case we'll provide you with, we meaning the grid, will provide you with electricity 24/7, 365, even during those peak demand days and peak demand hours. Or if you choose not to bring your own power, you're going to need to agree to curtail your electricity use during those hours of the year when there's not enough power to go around. So you have a choice.
What does curtailment mean in that case? They'd have to shut it down?
Well, they would have to find a way to use less electricity. So it would either mean shutting it down or moving to backup power, or maybe there's a way to partially to use less electricity rather than the full amount.
That seems like very difficult to do if you're running a data center. Are you aware of any technology that can do this?
They certainly can shut down for an hour or something like that if they need to. I mean, I'm not aware that it's impossible. I mean, if those are the rules, they need to figure out a way to follow the rules. And if we have a crisis related to electricity costs for our ratepayers, then we have a responsibility to deal with that. The thing that we've been working on is bills in multiple states to force the utilities in our respective states to explain how their votes at PJM are in the public interest. And that's a bill that's passed in a couple states over the last year or so. And it's been pending in other states, including in West Virginia. I'm the sponsor of that bill in West Virginia.
You don't think the response is a little bit slow and maybe come too little too late?
I think the response is slow, but this is an issue of the build out of our data center infrastructure. This is an issue that's going to take place over a period of years and decades. So while I wish we could have solved the electric power problem sooner, we have a responsibility to do the best we can given where we are today.
Evan Hansen, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen announced yesterday that ICE is moving its equipment fleet to Maryland, to Williamsport near Hagerstown in Washington County to be exact. That is where ICE has bought a massive warehouse to turn into a detention center. Maryland House delegates have been looking to pass legislation to stop or slow down ICE presence in the state. Von Stewart is a leading representative in that effort.
Last week, the House of Delegates passed a pair of bills that relate to ICE detention centers. The first one is House Bill 1017, which is sponsored by my friend and the chairman of my committee, Melissa Wells. And it's essentially a zoning bill. It says that for a private immigration detention center to exist in a county, there has to be explicit zoning permission for that use. It's in response to what we saw happen in Howard County, where an immigration detention facility was approved basically without the knowledge of the Howard County government, because it came in under this broad umbrella zoning catchment of government use. And a lot of counties have government use or general use or some other terminology of types of zoning uses that ICE was able to use successfully in Howard to kind of slip under the radar. And so what House Bill 1017 says is that communities across the state need to have an affirmative conversation with members of the community if they want to authorize a private immigration detention center to exist there. It doesn't block it entirely. If a county wanted to change the zoning to some kind of private detention zoning designation, there's nothing stopping them from doing that in the bill, but it at least provides transparency and accountability so that residents can weigh in about if this is the kind of use they want in their neighborhood.
And it still doesn't address the issue of if ICE itself builds a detention center, that this is only for private jails for ICE.
That's right. So ICE has really used kind of three different tracks to build detention centers across the country. The first is what they had prior to the Dignity Not Detention Act in Maryland, my bill back in 2020, that barred counties from working with ICE on immigration detention centers. That's kind of their most traditional way that they constructed these things, is that they worked with counties. And what the Maryland General Assembly said back 5 or 6 years ago is, no, we're not going to allow counties to do that. The second way, and this is another traditional way they've done this, is basically through private entities that own the land that then lease it to ICE. And that was the scenario that we saw in Howard County play out, where it was a private LLC that owned the building and it was going to be leased to ICE. And as of right now, the Howard County Council has now revoked that permit, and that process is ongoing there. And generally, governments have a lot more power to boss their own counties around and tell them who they can and cannot contract with, which is why the Dignity Not Detention Act was never even challenged in court. And also, historically, the courts have said that states have some degree of control over private entities as well. What gets more challenging is when ICE uses the third lane, which is when they fully own the land, the building, and it's all under federal ownership.
Now, that federal ownership jail, would that be addressed by the 1018 bill that you're also going through now?
Yes, that's the hope. So I was the primary sponsor of House Bill 1018, which essentially establishes minimal health and safety standards and also protections for whistleblowers and a reporting regime for all jails in the state. And so this was in response to really two things. First of all, we've just seen that jails generally can pose massive infrastructure strains on jurisdictions, regardless of who runs them. And secondly, we've heard that ICE is planning a massive federal jail in Williamsport, Maryland, which is right outside of Hagerstown in Washington County. Now, this is a developing area of the law, and it's not entirely clear at this point what power states have over federal facilities. But in a case out of the Ninth Circuit, the appellate panel found that Washington state could apply minimum health and safety standards on ICE facilities, at least private ones. It did not reach the issue about purely federal ownership, but at least private ones, if those standards were applied holistically to all jails in the state, rather than singling out ICE specifically. And so we've gotten an Attorney General letter's opinion on House Bill 1018. We've heard from a number of constitutional law scholars about House Bill 1018. We feel very good about it passing constitutional scrutiny. But even if parts are struck down, it's the right thing to do and it's really, House Bill 1018 is not strictly about immigration policy at all. We're not trying to dictate immigration policy from Annapolis. What we're trying to do is to say if you operate any sort of jail, that can increase utility bills. It can put strain on rural hospitals in the area. It can put strain on first responders. And we will want to make sure that you just have a basic emergency readiness plan in place. You have an HVAC plan. You have a utility grid plan.
Does your bill specify minimum standards they ought to be in these various categories, even maybe health particularly?
Yeah. So first of all, it authorizes our correctional services agency to promulgate specific health and safety standards. So right now, in terms of statute, the Maryland Correctional Services Agency only has authority over state and local jails, correctional facilities, criminal jails. So we are extending their authority over immigration detention facilities too, so that there's one uniform standard. The bill does not expand it to traditional federal criminal jails because the expectation is that we have a very limited authority to regulate them. And then the other thing the bill does is the one thing we know that we're on by far the firmest constitutional footing on is regulating private contractors who very often work in ICE detention facilities and sometimes also work in our state and local jails. And what we want to do is make sure that those private contractors, security personnel, medical professionals feel comfortable reporting violations of the health and safety standards. So we include some protections against retaliation. We include some whistleblower protection, and we have some mandatory reporting triggers in the language bill and in the language of the bill now.
Von Stewart, good luck.
Thanks.
If you know the Up County problem in Montgomery County, you might be familiar with this story. Derwood, which tends towards Up County, is the center of Magruder High School cluster. Magruder has the worst facility condition index number of all MCPS schools. And now, in the Wooten Crown controversy, they feel left out and unheard. MCPS Superintendent Thomas Taylor has proposed to move Wooten High School out of its Wooten Parkway building and put the entire school in a brand new building at the Crown development, where MCPS is 3/4 of the way to finishing a new high school building. The plan, which is called Option H, would then put Magruder, which needs a new building or a full renovation, at the old Wooten building, but not before another $100 million is found and spent on fixing it up. Dan Silva is the Magruder High School Cluster Coordinator for the countywide PTA body, MCC-PTA.
For years, MCPS has been saying with their own data and their own metrics that Magruder is among the worst high schools in the county. They put us on the CIP, then they pushed us back, and then they completely took us off. And now with this new round, which is supposed to be very data driven, their data now says we are in the worst condition of anyone in the county. And yet we're not only not on the CIP, but we're also now losing the fight for keeping Crown as a holding school, which would open doors for us to get on to the next CIP.
Explain why not using Crown as a holding school will push Magruder back in line.
If Crown was used as a holding school, they would put in first Damascus and then Magruder and then Wooten, which is the order of how we were prioritizing the CIP. And in that timeline, planning for the new Magruder would start in fiscal year 2030, and then our construction would be in 2032 and 2033. And what they basically said is without Crown as a holding school, that we wouldn't even be included in this 6-year cycle. So our planning wouldn't start until 2033 and our construction wouldn't start until 2035. The way it's proposed right now, we would be using the old Wooten as a holding school. Wooten is barely behind us. They've deemed it not suitable for to be a comprehensive high school. In order for us to even be there, basically to make it habitable, they have to put $100 million into that school, which is also not on the CIP. So this puts us not only behind Wooten, but puts us behind the capital project to improve Wooten, and behind another $100 million in the budget that we'd have to be chasing.
Damascus was supposed to be number one in the list of schools to go to the holding school. What's happened to Damascus now?
So Damascus was already in the CIP before they proposed Crown as a holding school. Damascus has a very big lot, basically. So they have the space to build a new school on site while the kids attend in the old building.
MCPS is hoping to save some amount of money by moving Wooten High School for close to $300 million, I believe. If they were to take $100 million from that and say, here, let's put this into the CIP, would you be okay with that?
Given the options that are available to me right now, there's no way I can offer enthusiastic support to that. In comparison, one of the options is using Crown as a high school, which is easier for our students to get to. The inequity of having Magruder being kicked down the road, which they've also done with Damascus and Wooten, right? All three of us are kind of similarly situated right now. But then, Damascus would get a brand new building, Wooten would get a brand new building, and then our kids, instead of even having the better holding school, would be, again, a longer commute to a school further away in a school that's not even renovated to be a comprehensive high school.
Are you seeing an uptick in the number of PTA members as a consequence of all of this?
Honestly, I have no idea what the membership is across the cluster. Thankfully, our principals have been very supportive. So I've been able to communicate through the principals so that, my communication hasn't just been limited to the PTA, e-lists. It's been going out to the entire school communities at all 9 of our cluster schools. We had, I think, 17 people testify for county council a few weeks ago. Unfortunately, I was the only one who was able to get into the Board of Ed meeting last week.
Well, have you got T-shirts yet?
I actually gave Dr. Taylor a T-shirt in my first Board of Ed testimony in the fall. It was a political cartoon with MCPS as Lucy pulling the ball from Charlie Brown wearing a Magruder shirt. So no, we don't officially have any T-shirts. Actually, we're meeting tonight to talk about some of the, organizing better and some of the long-term advocacy, things like websites, T-shirts, the signs. Because even if, let's say, they adopted option G going forward, they didn't go with option H, we're still not on the CIP. And people are starting to understand that this is going to be a longer fight than just these next couple of meetings. So,
no, you told me you hate politics, right?
The more I get into it, the more I hate it, and the deeper I have to go.
But you obviously know that, there is no escape, right?
Of course, disheartening that it's necessary, but it is absolutely a necessary evil.
People should not have to engage in politics. And that to me seems like counterproductive.
I'm speaking kind of tongue in cheek here, because obviously I'm working very hard to rally the troops and encourage this kind of activism, this kind of involvement in the political process. So obviously I can't say I hate it. I hate that we haven't seen any kind of positive outcome for our community.
Okay, I give you that. Magruder is in that position because they took a position that said they don't like politics.
That's the difficult thing, though. I mean, it's hard to put. I definitely can't blame the community for not getting involved in some regard. I mean, when you're comparing us to other communities, we have a lot more families with either 2 working parents or single parent homes. We also have a very diverse community. And there are, as I'm learning through this process, there are people who come from different cultures who, you could argue we're starting to see this on the federal level now, who are afraid to speak up politically.
These are problems that are universal. 2-parent households are almost everywhere in the county. The racial diversity that you're just talking about, also the immigration concerns in opening yourself up to the public like that is a problem. But I thought Durwood's a little bit like Poolsville, actually.
Beyond the geographic area of just Durwood, we do have some pockets here where, like I said, the demographics are very different, even just from one elementary school to another. There are definitely other clusters in other areas in the county, I think, where that's probably even more of an issue. However, it's coming out right now because we have a battle that needs to be fought.
Dan Silva, thank you.
Thank you.
Though we cannot see, hard to explain if you don't believe, makes itself known in the dark, leaves your heart racing cold and stark.
That's all for this episode. Be sure to check out our feature interview series that comes out Friday mornings. I Hate Politics is produced by me, Sunil Dasgupta. Music for this episode comes from Washington, D.C. progressive rock band A Shrewdness of Apes. Ian Mabley on vocals and guitar, Josh Pittman on bass, and J.R. Franks on drums. You can find their music at asoaband.com. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please email us at producer@ihppod.org. I hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. See you next time.